Imagine standing motionless in the dark with a spear in your hand, the wind cutting through wet leather and wool, the ground beneath you frozen so hard that tent pegs cannot bite into it. Somewhere beyond the camp ditch there are enemies awake in the same cold, waiting for weakness. Behind you, thousands of men must sleep, eat, keep warm, and remain ready to fight by dawn. And if you fail at any one of those things, winter will do what the enemy could not. That was the real Roman problem. We often picture Roman soldiers marching under a Mediterranean sun, helmets shining, standards high, roads stretching clean and dry into the distance. But Rome did not conquer the world in summer alone. Its armies fought in Gaul, Germany, Britain, the Balkans, and Armenia, where cold, rain, mud, and ice could destroy an army more quietly than battle ever could. Men froze on sentry duty, limbs blackened, supply lines slowed. Firewood became as important as swords, and still somehow Roman armies kept operating. So how did they survive brutal winter campaigns? The answer is that they did not survive because they were simply tougher than everyone else. They survived because Rome turned survival into a system. Clothing was part of it, camps were part of it, shared labor was part of it. Food, fire, engineering, command discipline, and even the way 8 men slept together were part of it. A Roman winter campaign was not a test of individual heroism. It was a machine designed to keep men alive just long enough to keep Rome dangerous. That matters because winter was not just uncomfortable, it was strategically decisive. An army in the cold does not merely risk sickness, it risks collapse. Wet feet become slow feet. Slow feet lose formation. Hungry men desert. Exhausted men stop digging. A camp not properly built becomes a graveyard by morning. And once morale breaks in winter, it is far harder to restore than after a defeat in battle. In battle, men can still blame bad luck. In winter, they blame the officers, the rationing, the road, the load on their backs, the miserable cloak that never quite dries, and the empire that sent them there. Roman commanders understood this with brutal clarity. Winter exposed every weakness in the army at once. It tested clothing, logistics, engineering, obedience, and endurance together. That is why Roman winter survival was never one trick. It was a chain of practical solutions, each one preventing a different kind of failure. The first layer was exactly that, layers. The old image of Roman soldiers in bare legs and open sandals becomes very misleading once the empire pushes north. Roman military dress was not as rigid as popular imagination likes to believe. In colder regions, soldiers adapted. They added heavier wool garments, used cloaks like the sagum, and in rough weather could rely on more enveloping outerwear such as the paenola. Their legs, so often shown bare in idealized images, could be wrapped or covered with fasciae, and in colder provinces, soldiers also wore braccae, forms of trousers or breeches that Romans once associated with foreigners but learned to value when marching through northern cold. That detail matters. It tells you something essential about Rome. Roman military culture could mock foreign habits, then quietly adopt them the moment they proved useful. Pride did not keep a man warm. Wool did. And then there were the feet. Nothing destroys a winter march faster than damaged feet. The Roman army's famous caligae, those hobnailed military sandals, were excellent for drainage, traction, and long movement in many conditions. But in Britain or the German frontier, they were not enough by themselves. Archaeology and writing from the Roman north make this painfully clear. Soldiers wore socks, they used insoles, they used extra wrappings. Vindolanda has preserved the most human proof of all, a letter mentioning socks, sandals, and underpants being sent out to the frontier. It is almost an embarrassingly ordinary detail, and that is precisely why it matters. Rome survived winter not through statuesque stoicism, but through the ancient equivalent of asking for more dry clothes. This is where Roman survival becomes more interesting than the legend. The empire is often remembered for discipline in grand terms, but in winter, discipline began with mundane things: dry cloth, extra leather, proper wrappings, a cloak that could shield wind and shed some rain. A soldier did not need to look heroic, he needed to avoid becoming useless. But clothing alone could never solve the real winter problem, because cold on campaign was not just something you wore, it was something you lived inside. A Roman soldier rarely endured winter as an isolated man. He endured it inside a contubernium, the smallest living unit of the army. Usually 8 men shared a tent on campaign, or a barrack room in more permanent quarters. This mattered far more than it sounds. Rome did not merely organize men for fighting, it organized them for survival. The contubernium shared tools, burdens, routines, cooking, and shelter. The front portion of their quarters could hold equipment and weapons, the rear served for living and sleeping. Space was cramped, air was stale, privacy barely existed, but warmth was collective. Heat from bodies mattered, shared maintenance mattered, shared responsibility mattered. If one man neglected the fire, others suffered. If one man failed to help set the tent, all 8 paid for it. If one man became weak, the group absorbed the burden until it could not. Roman military life made comfort scarce, but interdependence constant. In a brutal winter, that could be the difference between a functioning unit and a dead one. Then came the camp itself, perhaps the greatest Roman answer to winter warfare. Rome's genius was not that its soldiers could sleep in the open, it was that they tried not to. Even on campaign, the Roman army had a deep culture of fortification. A camp was not just a place to stop marching, it was a temporary piece of Roman order imposed on hostile land. Ditches were cut, ramparts raised, entrances controlled, tents arranged by plan. In winter, this habit became even more important. A fortified camp reduced surprise, preserved formation, organized supplies, and created a defensible core around which all the little acts of survival could happen. Firewood could be stored, grain could be processed, guards could be rotated, sick men could be watched, animals could be managed, officers could know where every sentry and every contubernium belonged. That geometry of camp life was not administrative fussiness, it was survival turned into architecture. And when armies settled longer, winter camps, hiberna, became even more significant. Caesar's campaigns in Gaul show just how central winter quarters were. He distributed legions across different territories, partly because of supply pressure, especially grain. That decision itself reveals the reality of winter campaigning. Armies did not simply huddle and wait for spring. They had to be fed, and feeding them meant dispersal, local control, storage, and risk. Enemies understood this too. Caesar's winter camps became targets because everyone knew that soldiers gathering wood, foraging, or sitting isolated in cold weather were vulnerable. Winter was not a pause in war, it was a change in the kind of war being fought. This is also why Roman survival depended on relentless labor. A winter army worked constantly. Men fetched timber, dug frozen ground, repaired leather, maintained weapons, guarded the perimeter, cleared drainage, ground grain, cooked rations, checked stores. A camp that stopped working began to rot from within. Wetness pooled, fuel ran low, food spoiled, tempers rose, sickness spread. That daily grind could be murderous. Tacitus gives one of the most chilling glimpses from Corbulo's army in Armenia. The winter was so severe that the frozen ground had to be broken before tents could even be pitched. Men suffered frost-bitten limbs, some died on sentry duty. One soldier, carrying firewood, was said to have had his hands freeze so badly to the bundle that they dropped away from the stumps. It is one of those details that tears the marble facade off Roman history. Beneath the standards and eagles were human bodies failing in the cold. And yet, even that episode reveals the Roman system. Why was the man carrying firewood at all? Because fire was not a luxury. It was central to keeping an army alive. Heat dried clothing, warmed food, preserved some measure of morale, and allowed camp life to continue. Winter warfare turned ordinary materials into strategic assets. Timber became life, so did grain. The Roman military diet was never glamorous, but in winter its simplicity became an advantage. Grain was bulky but dependable. Soldiers could process it into porridge, bread, or other basic meals. Salt, vinegar, preserved foods,
and whatever meat or local supplies could be acquired, all added to the system. This mattered because sophisticated armies often fail not when supplies disappear entirely, but when they become unpredictable. Rome preferred hard, repetitive sustenance over fragile luxury. A soldier may complain about coarse bread and sour drink, but he can march on them if the system keeps delivering. The mule, the wagon, the storehouse, and the measured ration were as important as any sword drill. Winter magnified that truth. A brilliant battlefield force without organized supply became a starving crowd. Rome understood that empire moved on grain, and in winter, grain was discipline made edible. Still, food and shelter were only half the battle. The other half was psychological. Cold drains the will. It makes men smaller. It narrows thought. Under prolonged winter hardship, soldiers begin to think not of victory, but of their own bodies, their boots, their hands, their sleep, their hunger, their resentment. That inward collapse is lethal to armies, because armies depend on men thinking in formation. Roman command culture fought that inward collapse with routine and severity. Officers enforced work, standards, watches, and punishment because the alternative was not merely disorder, it was decay. Corbulo is again an extreme example. His troops, softened by easier conditions, were forced back under real campaign discipline. He kept them under canvas in savage weather. He led by example, appearing among them lightly dressed, showing that the commander's body too was part of the moral economy of hardship. He punished desertion harshly. To modernize, it can look monstrous, and often it was. But from a Roman perspective, the logic was simple. If fear of cold made men abandon the standards, then fear of punishment had to be made even colder.
This was one of Rome's darkest strengths. It could turn endurance into obligation. The soldier did not merely suffer beside his comrades, he suffered under law, under inspection, and under the knowledge that weakness had consequences. Roman winter survival therefore had a human cost that should not be romanticized. Men endured because they were equipped, yes, but also because they were trapped inside a military structure that allowed very little softness. Compared with many opponents, that institutional hardness gave Rome an enormous advantage. Tribal coalitions could fight ferociously, but they often lacked the same capacity for prolonged, organized winter presence in the field. Rome could build, store, rotate, and remain. It could convert a season of hardship into a season of occupation. It could deny enemies the comfort of distance. It could hold roads, river crossings, depots, and frontier lines through months that might otherwise break a less systematized force. That is why winter campaigns mattered strategically far beyond survival itself. If Roman soldiers could stay where others withdrew, then winter became a weapon. It let Rome maintain pressure, suppress revolt, protect supply routes, and remind subject peoples that imperial power did not melt away with autumn. The true Roman achievement was not that soldiers could endure suffering, it was that Rome made endurance operational. And that brings us back to the central image, a man on watch in the dark, the cold pressing through leather and wool, hoping the fire lasts until dawn. He survived because 8 men shared one shelter, because someone had fetched wood before sunset, because someone had dug the ditch, because his cloak, socks, wrappings, and sandals were not matters of appearance, but function, because grain had arrived, because the camp had been laid out properly, because discipline kept men at their posts, because Roman commanders understood that winter destroys the disorganized first. That is the hidden truth of Roman winter warfare. The empire did not survive the cold by courage alone. It survived through systems so practical, so repetitive, and so unforgiving that they could carry ordinary men through extraordinary conditions. Rome's winter soldier was not a mythic hero standing above nature. He was part of a machine built to outlast it. And perhaps that is the most Roman thing of all. Not glory in the abstract, but order under pressure. Not comfort, but function. Not invincibility, but a disciplined refusal to come apart when the world turned hostile.
If there is one detail from Roman winter campaigns that surprised you most, whether it was the socks, the shared tents, or the brutal discipline, let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more hidden realities of Roman military life. And next time, we may look at what happened to a Roman army when its food system failed, and why hunger could frighten soldiers more than battle ever did.